Hey everyone, and welcome back to our What Kind of Internet Do You Want podcast, Web3 Wednesdays. I'm Amy James.
I'm Devin James. Bitcoin's price is $34,658. I think it's almost exactly what it was last week. My goodness. Today we are diving into Mastercard's foray into Web3, the permissioned JPM coin, security updates from MetaMask that are kind of exciting, the FTX trial controversy, of course, can't really avoid that one, a breach of yet another password manager. We just talked about that last week. This time, unfortunately, leading to actual crypto losses. Some AI developments, including the Biden administration's, I would argue, major blunder on this one, and the latest policy updates from Eric and more. So let's get into it.
All right, awesome. So our first story today is about Mastercard partnering with a crypto payment firm called MoonPay for Web3 payments. So MoonPay was founded by, or co-founded, I think, by Keith Grossman, who had previously been at Time magazine. So it was just like interesting to see him make this jump into crypto once he kind of took the orange pill, and also to see how he has persevered in the space despite making the jump kind of into what became a bear market overnight. So good on him for continuing to build, despite you always know that the things that are going to come out of that are, you know, better than the things that crop up overnight. So basically, the announcement is that MoonPay and Mastercard will be exploring how Web3 tools can improve experiential marketing and find new ways to connect with Mastercard's customers. So that's an interesting way to onboard new folks into Web3. If you have an existing Mastercard account, perhaps you'll be able to access these new tools through MoonPay. I think that the whole thing is sort of yet to be, all of the details are yet to be figured out. This is more of just a partnership announcement. But it's a big partnership, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Mastercard, you know, it's kind of one of the top three
payment providers,
right? And so will be really interesting to see where this goes, what it does, and if it meaningfully onboards some new users into Web3. I hope that it does.
Indeed. Well, our next one is similar. One of their competitors, I mean, you know, indirect competitors of sorts, JPMorgan, has been playing around with something kind of crypto related for the past couple of years. They started this, when was it, in 2020? Oh, wow, I thought it was older than that. But anyway, honestly, a pretty early play for a bank as big as JPMorgan. They basically have a permissioned token system for kind of peer-to-peer payments intra-bank within parties that they actually know and trust and everything like that. And it's gotten up to $1 billion of daily volume, which is kind of crazy because over the course of the 3 years they've been running it, it has processed 300 billion. So at this pace, they're probably going to hit that amount just this year. But of course, that is, as this article points out, a tiny, tiny fraction of the payments that they actually handle. $10 trillion daily. Right?
Yeah.
Right? That's absolutely insane. However, like I mentioned, this is, of course, permissioned. We've actually talked to a handful of different kind of well-established large companies out there that like a lot of aspects of this technology, but they're scared of the permissionless part. Sure. And especially when they're just playing around with B2B, like in this case, it just kind of doesn't make sense for them to do so. The only real reason for permissionless payments is when you want to make sure that anyone can authorize a transaction, can make sure that that transaction is legitimate without needing to know who that party is, so that you know if you've given them the authority to do so, they're not going to abuse that authority. So if you just build it as a permissioned system, you kind of know everyone involved, and you don't actually have to kind of turn that over to something as simple as kind of proof of work. However, they do talk about that their next stage in this is building a retail version of it. Now, I assume that they're planning to just do their retail version also permissioned. However, I just really wonder over time if they ultimately decide that that isn't worth the effort, because as we know from Web 2, handling permissions of end users means, login credentials, and those can easily be, stolen, obviously, by any number of parties and stuff like that. And so kind of who's handling the actual confirmation of transactions is that I think what a lot of them don't really understand is that something like proof of work makes it trustworthy without needing to know who it is.
Yep, that's right.
And that's a fantastic system. So it's just kind of nice to see major banks, actually experimenting with this stuff at the edges. I don't obviously, like I said, like that it's permissioned, but I think it's kind of their first step. They're just kind of experimenting a little bit.
Here's where I get kind of confused is why?
Why what?
Why
do it without the? Well, think about how many different
aspects.
Why
not just have a database?
Well, that's basically what they've got.
Yeah,
that's functionally what they've got.
It's a more complex, more resource intensive database.
Not necessarily. It doesn't need to be more resource intensive. I would argue that there's a lot of aspects of a blockchain that are beneficial. Like just a simple ledger is. The way that a blockchain just keeps a single ledger with debits and credits is simpler than the way that a lot of banks have kind of handled that kind of concept in the past.
That's fair.
So just borrowing that concept alone can increase efficiency, and it means it can run 24/7. It doesn't need to depend on the clearing.
A new ledger protocol.
Yes.
Where maybe
exactly.
It's kind of upgrading their existing ledger protocol because their existing one is from 600 years ago.
ish, exactly. Especially because this is just inside their own system. It doesn't need to have the level of complexity that a normal blockchain does, kind of thing. So it doesn't necessarily need to use, public keys and, stuff like that. So I don't know. I think honestly that the biggest benefit is the fact that they're getting off of something that depends entirely on kind of manual effort, which is what you need for interbank kind of stuff in the first place, like Swift and stuff like that. However, since this is only inside and doesn't work with kind of retail customers, we'll see if it can keep up that same level of efficiency without borrowing all of the other aspects of blockchain technology.
Yeah, I guess I hope it's a step in the right direction.
Exactly.
And
that's
that it ultimately leads to, some sort of open system because...
That's what we need. We need more of those. Exactly. I think we've just been brainwashed over the past really only not very long, 100 years or so, where governments were in control of money, were the only issuer of money. Most of history, money was issued by whoever was trustworthy enough to issue it. And they grew that trust by handling it properly and stuff like that. And that wasn't necessary. It almost was never really governments, honestly, because no one's really trusted governments. They're always, trying to take more. So I think that was just a short-term kind of, oopsie in the way that we organize things. And hopefully this is just a step in the direction of correcting that, making it a really open system that anyone can participate in.
Fingers crossed.
We shall see.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. All right. So our next story is again about Web2 walled gardens because these are, I think, the primary threat to the future of the internet right now. And so it's just one of the things that I feel like we just need to keep talking about to help people understand their power. It's really been an interesting journey for me as somebody who didn't have a background in tech 10 years ago and was talking about these things with you, helping to get these ideas out there when people were like, what are you talking about? The internet could never be censored. To now, there's a $44 billion deal everybody likes to talk about that was purportedly done in order to, be one place on the internet where censorship isn't happening. Now, people are still debating whether or not censorship is indeed happening on X, formerly known as Twitter. But we'll leave that aside for now and talk about this story. Inc.com, the headline is, Facebook gave his company hyper growth and then killed it just as fast. The major tech platforms have the power to make and break the startups that rely on them. Just ask Joe Spicer,
maybe? Yeah.
And the former staff of Little Things. So Little Things is a brand. You've probably seen their videos online because they were huge and super popular, known for their cute animal kind of videos, baby videos, those kinds of things. And basically what happened was he had started a pet food subscription company And as part of the marketing efforts around that, they were running a blog, and the blog started to become more popular than the subscription company. And they ultimately turned that into this media company, which became known as Little Things, and would put out content every day. And Facebook was their number one channel by a landslide. None of the other channels that they were trying to put content on could compete at all with the amount of views and revenue that Facebook drove through their company. And so they really doubled down on it. So I was just going to read a few sections from this article because it's a deep dive into how profoundly, what word should I use here? Authoritarian, I guess, would probably be the best one. Facebook can be and is when it comes to companies running, using them to reach their audience. I often talk about how if you are a creator and you depend on something like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or even X to reach your audience, you are like a sharecropper. You are building a business on rented land on which the terms can be changed at any time, and often are, because this is tech, right? Where the motto is move fast and break things, where people like to update things and change how things work really quickly overnight. The faster iteration, the better, and not really caring the collateral damage that may happen as a result of that. So here's just a little snippet of the article for you. Big tech giveth and big tech taketh away. Little Things was not the first company to learn that lesson the hard way, and it won't be the last. For entrepreneurs in almost any industry, there's no avoiding the platform's power to shape their businesses. Have an idea for an app? You'd better be in Apple's good graces. Running a retail brand? Prepare to compete with clearance prices on Amazon's private label products. Own a service company? Your Google business profile might as well be your front door, and good luck fending off competitors and scammers who are buying your keywords. The statistics speak for themselves. Google owns some 90% of the global market for online search. Meta, Google, and Amazon account for more than half of the U.S. digital ad market. And app developers operate in an app store duopoly run by Apple and Google.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those numbers.
Yeah, it's really shocking, right? And so you'll hear from founders a lot that what keeps them up at night is their Google search ranking or their ability to be on the Apple App Store. Especially in the crypto industry, we hear this a lot about how apps are taken off of the store for various reasons, because a lot of time crypto payments can sort of allow them to avoid that 30% tax that Apple will charge. And so then Apple will say, well,
you're out.
Yeah.
What's the line you used to use? Take the king's
you take
coin.
the king's coin, you sing the king's tune. That's right. And so what a lot of experienced creators will tell you is that the most important thing to do is to invest in growing your email list. And why is that? They won't know this exactly, but they understand it in like a I need to eat dinner tonight kind of way, because what they know is that no one can cut off their access between them and their audience if they have an email list. Now, that is debatable.
Unfortunately, that's not as true as it
email
used to
has
be.
become an oligopoly of its own, because Google runs all of the servers and all of the spam filters and all of that kind of stuff. So you can't even really host your own email server anymore. But
the concept is still there.
Sort of a protocol. And what a protocol means is that if you are that there isn't an intermediary, that the protocol is...
It's permissionless. Exactly. Well, it's supposed to be. Yeah.
We had
that experience, actually. We were selling some stuff on Amazon for a little while. And it was hilarious how quickly we saw competitors and then even Amazon itself start stealing some of the concepts of the products. And they would even
use the same branding as us. Like, it was wild.
It's ridiculous. I mean, obviously when you're in an international market and you can't prevent a Chinese company from stealing your brand when it's a US registered, when ours is US registered kind of thing. So you're bound to deal with that, but it was pretty hilarious how overt it was. But yeah, especially when you start to see Amazon itself doing that, and then obviously Apple does it on the digital side, and Amazon does it on the physical side, where Amazon sees some product that's super successful, so they create an Amazon Basics version of it and undercut like a mofo. And Apple does exactly the same thing, we just saw this happen with ChatGPT, where all of the little plugins that get attached to ChatGPT, it gives ChatGPT a lot of insight into what's the most popular. And so one of the most popular ones was Chat with PDF, and it was incredibly popular, I think 500,000 users kind of thing. And then the latest update from ChatGPT introduced that same functionality where you can update a PDF. And of course, everyone freaked out like, oh, poor guy, they completely destroyed his business. And he's like, it took me one day to build that. I've built 10 other things since then. I still have 500,000 users kind of thing. But yeah, exactly. If you don't have any guards against that, goodness.
That takes me actually to this one other section that I wanted to read from the article, which is something that we see a lot particularly among Web3 founders, is that they've previously been burned by building something for Web2. So that actually is continuing to happen to Web3 founders, particularly the founders that are trying to bridge into Web2, that are trying to bring people from Web2 into Web3 by using things like open APIs. So here's an example of this. There was somebody who was building a promising company called Social Leads that tapped into Twitter's free API to track the major life announcements of people that people made on the platform, weddings, births, deaths, and provide that information to insurers to generate leads. Interesting.
Yeah.
The company was just getting started when Elon Musk bought Twitter last fall and quickly raised the rent on businesses using Twitter's API. And by June, Social Leads was shutting down. Yeah. So there's a Web3 company that we think is pretty cool called Alex, which is all about archiving information into Arweave, which is a permanent file storage system. And what happened is that they were pulling from Twitter using that same API that was free.
Yeah.
And then the business model changed when Elon Musk bought Twitter, so that there is no longer an affordable API access price point. And they essentially just had to deprecate their use of Twitter, and they've moved on now to Reddit. So, I mean, good for them for being nimble and kind of keeping going. But really what this highlights to me is, because there's so many people that are like, oh, Elon Musk bought Twitter to save free speech. And it's like, sure, that's what he says. And there have maybe been some positive changes to the platform since he purchased it, because, some people that were deplatformed are now back. Some people that were deplatformed are still deplatformed. But he also is changing the business, because Elon Musk is a really talented businessman, obviously, right? Yep. And he's not going to just do something completely at a loss, right? He's going to find ways to make Twitter into a profitable business, which it never really was. And this is one of those ways that he's going about that, right? And so it has pluses that maybe it's returning free speech, but it also has minuses in that developers can't necessarily use the Twitter APIs that they were depending on. One of the investors in Web3 Working Group or a donor really to Web3 Working Group was LivePeer, and one of the founders of LivePeer had the same kind of thing happen. The company he started before LivePeer was using APIs that were, I think, from Twitter.
I think it was Meta or Facebook, whatever it was.
Okay. Yeah. And they were closed. They had built this thriving business, and it was doing really well. And then boom, overnight things changed. And that's just something that happens really often in Web2, and that the framework of Web3, the design of Web3 essentially prevents, if you're using the protocols that do that properly
in an open way.
And I think that there's absolutely an argument to be made that there are protocols that will do that not well, that there will be protocols or purported protocols that are essentially fraud. I don't want to necessarily use that word because it has kind of legal implications, but that unintentional fraud, perhaps.
Yeah. Sure.
But
sure, unintentional fraud. That's fair.
But that they're not able to execute on the vision that they are promising. But there are protocols that are succeeding in doing that, and that by their very design prevent access from being denied in the future.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting challenge because I'd forgotten that Facebook did the same thing. Because I remember there was a point when Facebook's APIs gave access to their full, graph search system, and it was really, really cool. And then they shut it down really quickly. There was a whole bunch of businesses running on top of it, starting to run on top of it. And then I'm assuming they just realized like they could monetize all of that, and so why not just build it out themselves? They have a million developers. In Twitter's case, I think it's a combination of an anti-spam kind of a thing, an anti-freeloader kind of a thing. Like there's a whole lot of really valuable things that you could do with the amount of data that's coming across Twitter if you have access to all of it for free. Almost, all of it. I used their API back in the day when it was free, and you could get an enormous amount at that free tier. And you could kind of see how that was being abused to some degree. And then also simply by charging a fee for it, it's kind of why they're doing the premium model. It's an anti-spam measure in that it kind of, if it increases the cost per user, then it'd be hard to run a bunch of fake users. You still can, obviously. But yeah, I still don't like the elimination of getting any amount of data from the API, get data, get tweets for free, just because there's so many really important ways that can be used. Or even at some sort of
price point that would be reasonable for somebody, for just like a developer who's bootstrapping something. I mean, that developer is likely also paying for servers, and they're bearing some
They've
sort
already
of
got
cost,
costs in the first
but
place.
it's a reasonable. There's some reasonableness to that cost, whereas the price point, But again, that just shows you how in Web 2 you are living on borrowed land.
Exactly,
and
it's up to them to decide if it might have been a stupid business decision on Musk's behalf, but it's up to him to make it.
That's right.
He's in control.
The ramifications of this borrowed land have had serious consequences on business, on entrepreneurs, on the growth of new startups. And this one little last bit from the article I wanted to highlight here, which says a 2021 report by the American Economic Liberties Project, an antitrust-focused think tank, suggested that one reason startup rates have declined since 2000 is that investors have become wary of companies that compete with tech giants. Entrepreneurs, too, may be scared off from building companies that both compete with and inevitably rely upon the giants. These firms largely function as private regulators gatekeeping access to digital markets and setting and changing rules to their benefit, said the managing director.
Wow, I hadn't thought about that.
And that it has this chilling effect on innovation and on building new companies.
Imagine if investors felt that same way about competing against AOL and CompuServe back in the day. And you kind of have to wonder how many of them are they just heavily invested in Facebook? And there's one thing to say, well, you just can't beat YouTube and Facebook. There's another thing to say, I don't want you to because I have too much to lose.
I think it's the first one.
Yeah.
It's that you just can't beat them. They are so big. But you
generational
can't because
change. Yeah.
They have entrenched deep roots into every single system. It's what we're going to talk about this when it comes up with AI, but it's that idea where they have so much control that they're able to set up the whole system so that nobody can compete with them.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Goodness. Okay. Well, next up, we are talking about MetaMask. MetaMask is an interesting one. A lot of people don't trust it at all because of the degree of access that it gains. When you run a browser extension, functionally, that browser extension can kind of keep track of everything that gets loaded into your browser, each page that you're on.
It always makes me nervous when I set one of those up because you have to give it the permissions, and it says it's going to have access to all these things.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if they're good about it, they're only going to ask for the things that they actually need, and then that gives you that kind of feel good about, okay, you're not actually taking everything you could just by taking advantage of me not really paying attention. And because a lot of people, those walls of text will just be enough for people to say, well, I either say yes to absolutely everything and just have a
read
shrug,
the terms
or
of
say
service,
no to
yeah.
absolutely everything. And then, I remember there was a time when you didn't want any notifications on your phone, so you'd hit no every time it came up. And, it protects you from a lot of different BS. But if someone's using it well, it might lose you access to something useful. Anyway, so in this case, MetaMask can be incredibly useful. And clearly it works because the article points out they have 20 million monthly active users. They are the most popular crypto wallet in the world. That's surprising. I would have thought Coinbase had more, but I don't know how. I haven't looked at the actual number on Coinbase, so that is a bit surprising. But anyway, what they're doing here is because they have access to what's on your page, if they are trained with certain information about what kind of scams are happening right now, what kind of phishing attempts are happening right now, et cetera, they can prevent them when especially when their wallet is being used to participate in one. So that's pretty cool. So they are partnering with a security firm that recently came out of what is the term for recently emerged from stealth mode with $33 million in funding, called Blockaid, to add native security alerts to the browser extension. The whole point here is that they will proactively prevent malicious transactions and protect users from scams, phishing attempts, and hacks claiming to do it without compromising user security or user privacy. That's reasonable, actually, because it doesn't need to be a centralized service that is centrally capturing all of the activity that users are doing and then evaluating it and then pushing it back out. Really, all you need to do is you just need to push the information about the types of scams and stuff that might be happening to each of the MetaMask wallets, and then they're running locally on your browser, and so they can kind of check what's happening on the page, compare against whatever the risk is, and let the user know, hey, this might be a phishing attempt, or we're aware of a scam that looks exactly like this. Be aware, and there's no reason to report that back to kind of home base. So realistically, it's possible that it actually could be. Kind of a cool approach, in my opinion. It looks, I don't know if it'll always be an opt-in feature, but at least for now, when they start in November, it's going to be an opt-in feature that you can get through MetaMask's experimental settings. It builds off of a previous collaboration with Blockaid earlier in this year when the two entities jointly launched, I think we mentioned this in one of our news show, an OpenSea security alert as an opt-in. So obviously, it's easy to kind of know everything that's going on within OpenSea and how OpenSea might ask the MetaMask wallet for permission to do certain things. So it was easier for them to be able to see, this is someone trying to trade your entire NFT collection for 1 cent. And so even though the person just sees, oh, I'm just being asked for 1 cent, that's totally fine, I'll hit OK. But they don't recognize, because there's a whole lot of information in a lot of these kind of transaction approval screens, that it's trading all the assets you've got in the wallet for that kind of thing. So that was kind of a known exploit that they were able to notice and stuff like that. Yeah, no kidding.
Wow.
So now they're expanding that out. Who knows, to what degree, they're able to kind of cover every single different way that crypto is used using MetaMask. That's a lot. But that they're partnering with a security firm with an enormous amount of funding suggests it might actually be a reasonable approach. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. So, do you want to have me go into LastPass first, just because it plays on that, or no?
Sure.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah,
you
go for
ahead. Okay. The reason this is kind of important is because there is just an enormous amount of scams within the cryptocurrency verse. We literally just talked. Usually, depending, honestly, unfortunately, on Web2 weaknesses. We just talked last week about a weakness that was running on a company called Okta that is used by 1Password. And we just kind of talked about how that's scary and everything, but because of 1Password's approach to security, it didn't really put too much at risk, because your 1Password, all of your passwords are put in what's called a vault, and then that vault is secured with your individual master password. I haven't used LastPass, but it sure sounds like they don't work exactly the same, because there was a data breach at LastPass that where did they say what it targeted an employee and resulted in decrypted user information and encrypted vault data being stolen. So I don't know exactly how someone would turn that into the ability to exploit, because if it's encrypted vault data, is it poorly encrypted? Like what's the deal there? Because somehow the attackers were able to actually get access to wallet seeds, private keys, various information that gave users access to their wallets, and it has resulted in not too many. So maybe that's why they're just kind of doing it kind of I don't know, going after them kind of one by one, because there's obviously a lot more users of LastPass involved, but only 25 victims have fallen victim to this so far.
Funds were stolen.
Yes,
right?
$4.5 million as of a couple of days ago.
That's terrible.
So yeah, this tweet, there was two different security researchers involved, just a crypto anonymous kind of person named Zach XBT, and Taylor Monahan, one of MetaMask's developers, have been kind of digging into it and trying to figure out exactly what's going on. They eventually figured out, the thing that they all have in common is that they stored keys on or some sort of data in their LastPass. And they are basically just saying, if you think you've got anything related to your crypto wallet, or for that matter, your bank's, stored in your LastPass, get them out of there.
So wild to me is,
or not get them out of there, change your passwords.
Yeah, is that a $4.4 million hack is a small
true.
loss.
Very true.
In crypto now.
Very true. Well, it's because they're stealing it from individual wallets. You think about all the bigger ones, they're stealing from, say, an exchange, like a honeypot. You know?
Wow, that's a really good point.
Exactly.
That's
you get admin access to an exchange, you've got billions of dollars of access.
It's like a combination of centralized and decentralized, because it got the passwords from a centralized repository, but then in order to steal the funds, it had to go to individuals.
To each individual wallet.
So now imagine a world where the passwords aren't in that centralized repository, but they're also decentralized.
Right.
Now, in order for any kind of theft to happen, they'd have to steal an individual password
and then hack those, and then go after their wallets. If they happen to be on a hosted wallet, if even the better version, they're not on a hosted wallet, they're on their hardware wallet. So they might have their password, but they don't have the hardware wallet.
It's one of those things where it's like, it feels really far down the field still from where we are right now, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
It really doesn't have to be. And I hope that two things will happen. One, there's no doubt that awareness is growing vastly from, like I said in the beginning, where, 10 years ago when we were first talking about these ideas and people were laughing at us, to now it's pretty commonly held knowledge that these kind of vulnerabilities exist. And like whether it's Facebook controlling entrepreneurs' ability to, or creators' abilities to reach their audience, or people's ability to speak freely on these platforms, to things like your banking password, whether that's your online traditional bank or whether that's your,
hosted
crypto
wallet
funds.
on Coinbase or whatever. Yeah.
However that is being controlled, people are obviously feeling very vulnerable because we've just seen hack after hack after hack after hack after hack, and just so much money. So many systems have been compromised because of these centralized honeypots.
Yep.
And when we talk about the power of cryptography, I did a video about this in our basic series that one of my favorite of the basic series is the cryptography video. So if you want to know more about cryptography, I definitely recommend that, because there's these two pieces to cryptography that we don't often think about. There's asymmetric cryptography and there's symmetric cryptography. And the web is built on a combination of these, because large data sets can't be done only with asymmetric cryptography, like a public and private key cryptography, key pair.
It's very, very slow. Yeah.
It would, the amount of time is it's too heavy for the large data sets. And so they use symmetric cryptography, where there's just a single key, and that's why these breaches can happen, because if all that has to do is for that key to get out,
and they get access to everything inside.
A number of people already have to share that key in order for that to happen, and then one additional person who shouldn't have access to it has to get it, and then everything's busted open. So check that out if you want to know more about how these
switch
systems
this
work
whole system
and
over
why.
to all asymmetric, and suddenly, good luck getting anything.
Yeah, it'd be amazing.
Scammers.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of scammers.
Oh, lordy. Our most infamous scammer, Sam Bankman-Fried, is on trial. As we all know, it has been the news of October. And now here we are, November 1st, and his trial is essentially over. Prosecutors were giving their closing statements this morning. According to a Bloomberg article, the prosecutor in his closing statement said that Sam Bankman-Fried lied about big things and he lied about little things during his time on the witness stand. And hearing the trial recaps from the people who were following this really closely, it was very interesting to, I don't know if interesting is the right way to describe it. It was like
kind of stunning.
Eye roll.
Yeah.
To hear how often he said things like, I don't recall, or tried to like be weird about like what definitions mean or what, just be squirrely, just be generally squirrely. And so anyway, the kind of update on the trial is that closing statements have happened or are happening today, and that the jury deliberations will begin as soon as tomorrow. In this particular case that's being tried right now, there are 7 charges that he is facing, and then he's expected to face 5 more criminal counts in a second trial that's scheduled for March of next year. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges in both cases, which is fascinating. I was really sad to hear that there will be another trial in March, simply because this is the kind of news that dominates the news cycle and is just lousy.
Yeah.
Right? It's just lousy. It's kind of...
It's just a psychopath
It's very
lying.
similar to Madoff in that it's just like you can't look away. It's like a car crash, it's just like your animal brain is just like sucked into like the gore and horror of what's happened here. And yet there's no there other than a psychopath who pulled off a massive fraud. And he used crypto really as his cover story. And it's really sad that this kind of thing is giving crypto a bad name, because I like to think about the different classes of crypto people, right? There, and like we came in the class of 2014, and the class of 2014 and previous to us too. But that class had a very strong. They were in it for the ethics. They were in it for the ethos. They were in it for the ways that this technology could change how we are all able to operate as humans, how we are able to have certain rights and responsibilities as citizens of the internet. And those people, a lot of them have fallen off because of the kind of people that have gotten in later, that have been more about making a quick buck in the kind of casino culture that's happened, and that kind of just like up only mentality. And so anyway. Yeah.
I mean, it's weird because you brought up Madoff. In the Madoff trial, no one focused on the on what the currency was that he was stealing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No one focused on the way that he was.
It was the fraud. It was the lies. It was the
right. What was he even investing in? Like the stock market? Like people weren't like the stock market is a fraud.
The stock market must be broken because it is, but in other ways. But like, and unfortunately, it has been a total energy suck, and just pulled in a lot of people's attention and given a lot of strength to crypto's detractors, acting as if somehow it has something to do with crypto, and also that as if it could be fixed with more stringent regulation in the United States, when in fact all of his fraud was carried out outside of the United States for that reason. So you can't regulate the entire world. That's an absurd premise.
Donations to politicians, which
of course
not been returned, and there has been little acknowledgement from the folks that he was publicly rubbing elbows with about how serious this was, except to put a very bad taste in the mouths of the legislators, and that's also harming the industry. So
Indeed.
We will obviously be watching the trial along with everybody else,
waiting anxiously for his guilty verdict.
But from everything that I've heard so far, it seems as though he has not put up a very good defense.
No.
And
he thought he was. It's definitely what was funny. You got the impression that he was overtly ignoring the advice of his counsel, like going completely against what they thought he should do.
I think even at one point they objected.
Yes.
The objection was sustained, and he answered
the
anyway.
I have to answer this. Yeah, exactly. And it's just like
What is
he
happening?
just thinks he's the smartest person on the planet, and that he's going to be able to fool everyone with his twisted BS. But like the prosecutor destroyed him, absolutely destroyed him, and you love to see it when you got a psychopath that hurt a whole lot of people and still doesn't even understand that for himself. It's nice to see him kind of put in his place. So there's that.
I suppose.
Anyway, next up, we're looking in the tie between AI and blockchain. We have something new called ChainGPT, the blockchain-powered AI product suite. And what is it? It's a whole lot of things. It is a whole lot of things. It has a crypto chat. It's a new chain that gives you access to various GPT type things. It includes a crypto chatbot, an NFT art generator, a smart contract auditor and generator, and AI generated news. I kind of feel like that's the wrong way to frame that. It's really AI generated news summaries, but saying AI generated news just means, isn't that another word for fake news? Oops. It's kind of got an interesting play on how to actually put some utility behind the token, and I really hate when that term is used. They call it's the utility of the token because it gives users access to certain things, but it I don't know. It's on the edges of what the term utility really means, I think, honestly. But anyway, what it does in this case is there's some stuff that's completely free to use, and then some things that are premium access, like having to spend the tokens for pay per prompt or staking the tokens until you get to some particular tiered status, and that gives you access to other kind of stuff within the ecosystem. It gives access to 4 large language models and 2 text-to-image models. So it's pretty cool, just combining a whole bunch of stuff that's out there into one kind of ecosystem to kind of just create beneficial stuff on top of it. Some of those things I would argue, honestly, aren't very beneficial. Like ChainGPT chatbot, very cool. Just give you access to a whole bunch of stuff that's trained specifically on crypto and blockchain type stuff, give you answers to those kind of things. That can be good. We've experimented with that. It can sometimes make stuff up, so you still got to be careful with that. But then the next one, AI NFT generator. Come on. If a JPEG that was generated with just a very small amount of effort, if you could somehow justify, because it's limited and it still had to have human artist involved in creating it, gave it some amount of value, being able to just spin them right up just with a prompt or with a button really, really lowers the value of stuff of that kind of art. So that's just silly. And it's honestly NFTs as collectible art, I think always was a Beanie Babies kind of a thing, but at least Beanie Babies had a physical. Well, it was like Beanie Babies because they were interesting. They were somewhat unique. So collectors, I was just talking to a coin collector guy yesterday. Things that are unique, there's a subset of people that are going to find that interesting and are going to assign value to it, and so they're going to want it as a result of that. And so it doesn't have to be special, really. It just needs to be kind of limited, and that's enough for something to have value. So it always had, I'd say, a limit to its usefulness and a limit to how valuable it could really be overall. I think the technology behind NFTs is much, much more valuable than this kind of JPEG generator concept. But this is really going to drop the value as low as possible. If you can just if now as an automated function, you can click a button or maybe enter a prompt. It's not entirely clear, what all is involved in the art generator. But if an image generator can be designed to create images and then turn them into NFTs and put them out into the market, then you're oversupplying the market. You're hyperinflating your NFT market. It's probably not the best of ideas. This isn't going to work out well for NFT collectors, I would say. The next one is interesting. Ask Crypto People. It's a chatbot that impersonates famous crypto individuals, such as, say, Justin Sun or Vitalik Buterin. These mimics can be conversed with and will reply in the style of the impersonated individuals. This is touchy because, both of them have certain conversational styles that can be mimicked. The problem is some people are going to think that they're actually chatting with those person, or some people can actually get that into their head kind of thing. Or they're going to think because this is artificial intelligence and it's so smart, they can ask, the Vitalik Buterin mimic a question about, the future scalability of Ethereum and something like that. And the AI is going to make up an answer. It's going to be styled like Vitalik, but it's not going to be Vitalik's answer. It's not going to be Vitalik's brain feeding in, especially if it's not something he's talked about. Obviously, he's talked about scaling Ethereum, but if it's a new thing that the person is asking about that it hasn't been trained on what his particular opinion on this thing is, that can be really dangerous because it can give some people the impression that they're talking. It will be it will be wild. I guarantee you that. It'll give some people the impression because it's trying to come up with these GPT things are very good at sounding confident about their answers, especially when they completely make them up. I would really hope that you can add some extra training or some extra kind of prompting to make sure that it doesn't make stuff up, and that if an answer isn't extractable from its training data, then just tell you, I don't know the answer to that. That would be way, way better than having it make it up, because the amount of confusion that will happen is going to be insane if they don't.
You'll see this at the end, so I'm kind of like spoiler here, but there's this like cool bit of music that was made by mashing up an AI with an existing artist, a dead artist, an existing artist, and I won't give away the rest of it. Yeah. But at the beginning, it like declares that it's not what it is, even though it fully sounds like what it is. Mm-hmm. And that would be cool if the AI did that, right? Or something like that. Like this is not Vitalik Buterin, but it's his answer.
But it sounds like him, kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. Like that, I pulled this from historical. I know this is what he thinks, and I sound like him, but I'm not him.
And it would be really, really great if the AI would actually get enough humility to be able to say, I don't know the answer to that. Because so far, that's not something it's capable of. It's like a 2-year-old.
That's not going to
happen.
So
funny.
I'm afraid. Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
And then another little feature, the regular flow of AI generated news about the latest happenings in the again. Don't call it AI generated news. It's a bad idea. AI generated summaries of the news, recaps of the news, stuff like that. It's probably a good idea.
Fair.
And then they do things like they audit smart contracts, or they'll even generate smart contracts. This could be cool because, again, smart contract is just language. It's very precise language. So even with some amount of compression on it, as we've called it, it hopefully can still get it right because there's very precise rules around coding languages. So we'll see. I'll have my eye on it. This article really is just kind of trying to sell the token. It tells you about the tokenomics and all that kind of stuff. And, I try to stay away because it also then gets into that it is also a platform for launching. I did want to point this out. It's a platform for launching early stage token sales and giving users access to, early stages of seeing that. And then the funny part about it is that it actually says, and if you do well, you can get as high as a 9x ROI kind of thing, while boasting a refund policy for underperforming projects. So if they help you launch a token that doesn't 2x, they'll refund you. Boy, that sounds really security-ish right there. Good Lord, people. So we'll see. And then the last one,
the definition of
right, exactly. You're making promises of increased returns. Exactly. And then one of the last things it includes is a prompt marketplace. There's things of value that you can create a marketplace around. And early on, when there's nerds that are calling themselves prompt engineers and stuff like that, and there is a lot of work that goes into good prompting. So it's reasonable to call yourself that if you're very good at it right now, I would say. But that's going to become just general. It's going to become either common. It's like simple text is simple text. You can't protect it. You can't. Good luck. If anyone that gets access to it decides that they want to share it might be against your terms, but you can't stop them from doing so. So trying to protect the financial value of a prompt seems kind of silly to me. So I would imagine that the prompt marketplace will work out really well early on until it kind of levels to about zero, and now there's no actual value to going after something like that. So we'll see. Going to keep our eye on it. It seems like a cool project. I always enjoy where there's overlap between kind of the emergent AI and blockchain space, and this is definitely a good example of it, I would say. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, in the same AI space, we, of course, have to touch upon Biden's executive order. It was released yesterday?
2 days ago.
2 days ago, Monday. Yeah. It was the talk of Twitter yesterday.
Yeah.
And, very upsetting. I actually said to my mom for the first time, I'm really concerned about the future.
Oh,
and
wow.
she started laughing because everyone is feeling concerned about the future lately, right? Like there's just so much craziness going on, and people are saying that these times are stranger than any that they have lived through. And I've wondered that, is that true, or are we all just on Twitter
always
now?
cyclical? Yeah, true.
And and yet after this executive order came out, I've really started to wonder if the tech industry will in fact remain in the U.S. It's just alarming. So really quickly, it's too long for me to cover everything, but essentially the order uses the Defense Production Act, maintaining that tech firms must inform the government when developing any AI system that could pose risks to national security, national economic security, or national public health and safety. And the too long didn't read takeaway of the executive order is that large AI plays like ironically named OpenAI, like Microsoft, like Meta, the leaders of creating the AI that's available so far have successfully gotten an executive order which protects their moat around AI, which makes it so that they can continue to develop the technology, but that startups who are just a couple of developers that want to build something cool will not have the resources to comply with the onerous regulations that this kind of executive order will create. And that is terrifying, because the bottom line is that AI is a Second Amendment issue. It is a sort of weapon, if you want to think about it that way, that if only certain people have access to it, they will be able to shape thought, shape information, shape access to information in a way that we kind of can't fully comprehend. And the only way that kind of technology is quote unquote safe is if we all have equal access to it and we're able to, I hate to use these weapon kind of analogy terms because it makes it sound more scary, that I don't want to give fuel to the AI doomers, but really this kind of regulation is what leads to the AI doomers being right. And that's why it's a really upsetting moment in the journey. I hope that I hope that we get off of this trajectory and onto one in which AI is something that there are open source versions available and that is legal to use in the US and to build in the US, so that, people who want to let's say, be the ones in charge of the machines rather than the machines being in charge of us, that those people can remain in the US and continue to innovate here and continue to raise our families here, because that's really what's at stake. And it's a very scary time. The reason that the president gave for issuing this executive order is that he said he saw an AI-generated video of himself saying something that he didn't say, and he was confused by that.
He said, when did I say that?
I would
Doesn't
say
really help.
His confusion may or may not be about having said something.
Ooh.
But
I mean, yeah, you can listen to anyway, yeah. We don't need to go there.
Right? But I think
terrible.
It's bad news, and we really need for the meme that's been going around Twitter that I love is legalize math.
Yeah,
because that's what's so silly about all of this.
Math is not a crime.
Yeah, is that it's going to be one of those things that's like underground and weird.
Yeah, or guess what? Outside of the country.
Well, both, frankly, right? I mean,
yeah.
Before we were in this industry, we were in a design manufacturer industry. And of course, we made products in China initially, because that's what you do if you manufacture something at this point in time, or this was more than 10 years ago now. But The point remains. And when you were in China, you were able to use VPNs to get access to our machines at home. And that just shows how porous these borders are, how it's sort of ridiculous to have these kinds of, firewall kind of like, barriers around things, because tech people can always find their way through them pretty easily.
Yeah.
And it's really just that they're going to make good people outlaws.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's awful.
Not to mention it's unconstitutional. The Supreme Court has concluded that government-compelled speech is not okay. The government can't require you to speak anything. And so one thing they want you to do is you have to disclose your safety tests, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's unconstitutional. They put a limit. Literally, they said
on the number of calculations you can have.
on integer or floating point calculations.
Yeah.
And currently, those limits are bigger than what went into ChatGPT. Only about 10x. Only about 10x, to be completely honest. So, and that's ChatGPT 4. What they're using for ChatGPT 5 would obviously fall into that. Now, it's not saying they become illegal. It just says they have to be registered. But obviously, something like OpenAI and Google's, Bard or whatever, all these other kind of things can do that. That's no problem. They have a very, they have a lot of money for dealing with government type stuff. But like Amy pointed out, startups won't necessarily be able to. And also, offshore, this is stupid, because if they're saying that super powerful AIs are dangerous, there's literally nothing that's going to be able to stop, say, China or literally anyone else from developing those things, especially if the U.S. government is saying these are too dangerous. We're afraid of them domestically. We're afraid of our own companies that are on our own side and working for Americans' interests, developing these things. Imagine someone who doesn't have America's interests at heart as its primary intent. So we're not going to have as powerful AI systems as any other country that decides to take a different path on this. That's a terribly stupid idea. And then they try to make it okay by doing all these other kind of things. Like they even try to say, we're going to spend money doing research on AI ourselves so that we can use it to fix various broken systems within the government and stuff like that. Dumb, absolutely dumb. And then also that, because he got fooled by an AI, it was a little demo to him, like how easy deepfake technology has gotten, or how good deepfake technology has gotten. And so their approach is that they want to work with the Department of Commerce will develop guidance for content authentication and watermarking to clearly label AI-generated content. Wrong approach. You can't do that. It would be incredibly easy to authenticate and label real content. If the White House puts out a statement, they could sign that thing. Now you know that it's real.
Backwards. That's
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. They have it backwards. So I hope to God that someone can make that argument, that we're given the opportunity to make that argument. Someone can make that argument that if we want to be able to distinguish real from fake, the only reliable way of doing that is signing the real stuff. And everything that isn't signed, you can evaluate with a critical eye and say, well, no one authenticated it. It would have a huge impact on the market. It would be very, very detrimental to this, that, and the other. It's probably fake. Right. But you can't...
PSYOP
anyone that's
otherwise.
Exactly. Anyone that's trying to claim that you can, because of the existence of the website, AI or not, that somehow people have convinced themselves that there's a foolproof way of knowing that something is AI generated, it's just stupid. There isn't. They're plain and simple. It's been wrong many a time. And then things like, this is especially funny, strengthening privacy protecting research. They're pretending like they want to protect Americans' privacy, and they even say such as cryptographic tools that protect. Meanwhile, they're going to war against the cryptocurrency industry at the same time. This is just absolutely bad policy. This is exactly what proponents of emergent AI and open source software were worried they were going to do, because, like you said, it pushes it out of open spaces.
Yep.
And developing AI openly is the smartest way to make sure that, one, it's not going to become a serious danger, Terminator style, but also a subtle danger that's influencing us in all these different ways. And we're going to have our guard down by saying, oh, well, we got the government, they passed this thing, and it's all good. And when any country that does want to do us harm decides to fund their own and kind of attack our internet with it, we're going to be completely unprepared for that. And so that's right. Really unfortunate, and I'm really let down that that's how they're approaching this. Yeah. But it's not entirely surprising. But
It's not.
Yeah, it is.
It's
I mean,
sad.
it's not surprising. Here's why, because here's how they're approaching cryptocurrency. Here's a little article about basically just that Elizabeth Warren has been kind of at the front of this whole fight against cryptocurrency, and things were starting to get somewhere last year, and they're not anymore. They're, between the SBF trial and their claims that the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7th were funded enormously or primarily through cryptocurrency, has given them a lot of ammo.
It's provably false.
It is, and that's kind of
false.
That's where I was going with this, is that the media basically reported and used a data provider as the source of their report, that it was something like $93 million of crypto that went into terrorists' hands, and then the firm itself, Elliptic, has come out and said, yeah, you're completely misunderstanding this. You're misquoting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, they claimed that 90 million of crypto went into terrorist groups. And now what's extra funny is that some of the journalists, Tally was the guy that wrote one of these articles, is basically saying, oh, they're lying, they're misrepresenting, because back in April when they wrote this report, they were saying exactly the opposite, and here we have, what do you call this?
Community notes.
Community notes to the rescue again. Basically, just simply because a lot of people just don't read enough of it, but some people that do, that participate in this community notes program, do, and they basically just say the author is completely misrepresenting the original report. The original report, in fact, does state that wallets and funds are related to but not owned by the groups mentioned, and include funds in broker wallets. And we made this point a little while ago, and also the fact that they've actually stopped using it. They make the point that, here it is, Hamas publicly even said they're going to stop fundraising using crypto in April, because they realized if you're using this stuff to break the law, it's really easy for legal authorities to track you down and find out who's making contributions, et cetera. And it just kind of, again, highlights the point that you don't go after the payment technology, you go after the people that are doing the thing itself. However, this also kind of has bolstered our case, because there's enough cognitive dissonance surrounding this that some of her supporters, especially in Congress and in the Senate, believe the headline version of what she's saying and doesn't really understand the more nuanced version, and they kind of get themselves in some trouble by having done so. And here's a good example.
So let me ask you, why didn't Hamas use its American Express card to finance that awful terrorist? Why? Why wouldn't they use their Amex or PayPal?
So actually, they are using bank accounts and credit cards and payment cards. I know that firsthand, because many Israelis are now monitoring all campaigns, and they see that.
Ouch. So you love to see that, because when narratives just start going crazy and everyone's buying it, someone is going to make the misstep of just asking the obvious question of, especially even if you are as beneficial as possible and you say that this funded 1% of the amount of money that was raised for this, well, what about the other 99%? Why are we focusing so much on the technology involved in that 1% instead of the technology involved in the other 99%? No one's going after the banks to say you're responsible for this. In fact, a number of banks have been caught kind of blatantly doing this for cartels and terrorist-related organizations, and they get slaps on the wrist. So give me a break. Take that more seriously. Eliminate 99%, and then you come talk to me about the 1%, or way, way less, to be honest, that's happening through crypto. But with that, let's go ahead and dive into Eric's policy update real quick, yeah?
Hey everyone, this is Eric with your weekly policy update. While Sam Bankman-Fried is taking the stand in his own defense in New York in the trial over FTX and fraud, two senators, Senator Hickenlooper out of Colorado and Senator Tillis out of North Carolina, have introduced the Proof Act. This legislation would require that cryptocurrency exchanges such as Coinbase or Kraken would have to show in a monthly audit that they're holding all the digital assets that they say they have for consumers. This way, if consumers wanted to take their cryptocurrency off the exchange, that they would have the funds required to do so. This was allegedly the problem with FTX, as customer funds were used from everything from private jets to naming the Miami Heat arena. Of course, this is not the first or only introduction of a proof of reserve bill in the United States. Earlier this year, Texas passed a Proof of Reserve Act, which was model legislation from the Texas Blockchain Council, and it was passed into law, taking effect a little later this year. It still remains to be seen whether Mike Flood will make cryptocurrency or digital assets a part of his agenda, but this legislation is bipartisan and has a chance to be added to one of the end-of-the-year bills, so it perhaps has a chance to get through Congress. Also of note, the White House put out an executive order today on artificial intelligence, which could have large implications for the software and computing space across the United States. That's been me for your weekly policy update. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Eric. In our final story today, I just wanted to touch quickly upon Hester Peirce's statement that she put out, her statement of dissent on the LBRY case. She begins with, "The Commission has brought many troubling crypto enforcement actions, but the LBRY case has especially unsettled me." And she talks about how she wasn't able to speak about the case while it was active, but that this statement is long overdue and that she wanted to say some things about it. And she says, I'm just going to read a few sections from it and then we'll talk a little bit about it. She says, LBRY announced that it will not move forward with an appeal of the decision. Instead, the company will shut down and its assets will be placed in receivership and used to satisfy its debts, including the civil money penalty owed to the Commission. Are investors and the market really better off now after the Commission's litigation contributed to the demise of a company that had built a functioning blockchain with a real-world application running on top of it? This case illustrates the arbitrariness and real-life consequences of the Commission's misguided, enforcement-driven approach to crypto. One does not have to dig deep to find fraudulent crypto projects that sold tokens with promises that they did nothing to fulfill. Another quote here is, "Why go after a company that sold a token for a functioning blockchain with an established use when we could have pursued plenty of other projects that were outright frauds and did not attempt to comply with securities laws?" Exactly. A few key details from the case here that I hadn't followed as closely that I just wanted to note is that initially the Commission sought monetary remedies from LBRY of $44 million. And that was pushed back against the court stated that in the absence of fraud allegations and the fact that there were some measures of uncertainty regarding the application of securities laws when LBRY commenced its offering, those facts were taken into account when considering the penalty, and the Commission pared back its request to only $111,000, which the court did approve. That's quite a difference in penalty.
It's interesting that they phrased it as its offering, because my memory was with LBRY, they literally never did an actual token offering. They just started allowing people to mine them onto they held some themselves, but they never sold them publicly from themselves.
I think they sold them to investors. They sold tokens to investors.
Isn't that, well...
Right,
good
exactly.
Lord, isn't that supposed to be the point?
Mm-hmm. So, this is probably one of my favorite lines from the note here. She says, "The application of the securities laws to token projects is not clear, despite the Commission's continuous protestations to the contrary." Mm-hmm. And then finally, she says, "The time and resources we expended on this case could have been devoted to building a workable regulatory framework that companies like LBRY could have followed. And then the market could have decided LBRY's fate." And so I just want to, say thank you to Commissioner Peirce for making this statement, for continuing to be a champion for the industry and continuing to earn her nickname as the crypto mom. And, she has that nickname because she cares about how the next generations will fare. Mm-hmm. And she recognizes that technology like this will make our lives better. And she's trying to give us a path to move into that world. And there are rumors that she could be the next chair, and that would be wonderful. I think it's really interesting. I don't know that much about how it works, that she's even able to sort of make this statement of dissent, as a commissioner, when they, of the SEC. The SEC is the one that brought this case. The way that the whole LBRY case played out was particularly close to us because we had started a similar kind of protocol. Ours was for more kinds of content, but it was similar in that it was intended to,
decentralized media distribution.
Decentralized distribution, and to give the control of the distribution to the creators. They started just a couple of years after we did. And there was this sort of moment in time when ICOs became hot in 2016, 2017, 2018. And we watched LBRY essentially do an ICO. I don't know if they called it that. I don't know exactly the terms by which they did it, but they had some sort of pre-mine of tokens that they sold. And we didn't want to do that because of what happened here. It was too unclear, and we thought that if we were to be prosecuted in the way that LBRY was, it would be harmful to our project, and we wanted the project to be able to succeed and not be encumbered by this kind of problem. And it's sad because although theoretically the LBRY blockchain could continue to live on because it is a decentralized permissionless protocol, all software has to be maintained by someone. And how that will continue, who will continue to do that work, how that work will be funded, it seems challenging.
I wouldn't be surprised if some of the community decides that they want to kind of continue to maintain it. But without the involvement of the initial group of people, and they're going to move on to do other things, I'm sure. I think I heard that they're going to build a project on top of Arweave. That's pretty cool. It's really unfortunate how that played out. And she makes some fantastic points that this just felt like this wasn't actually serving the benefit of investors or the community. It didn't create any more clarity.
And one of her main points is that LBRY did in fact produce meaningful software that was used by millions of people.
I think they were the most popular crypto app.
It was 2 million or 6 million
something
monthly active users.
Yeah.
They were very popular.
Right.
And they produced something real.
Yep.
And yet, despite all of that, they were prosecuted. And it just seems like they were prosecuted when so many other...
Agreed. Totally shady offerings.
Totally fly by night. Just absolutely, coming to just say a bunch of jargon, flowery... crap and take your money.
But those ones tend to be pseudonymous, somewhat anonymous, maybe not even in the US. So it was hard to figure out who to go after. This was easier. All of its people were publicly known. They went through the convention circuit, etc. So it's just easier for them to go after them.
So
messed up.
The final line of her dissenting memo here is, what could I do to help another group of people with a big idea for changing the world from going through what LBRY has over the past several years? I have not come up with an answer to that question. However, I urge people who have suggestions about how the Commission can write its course on crypto and innovation more broadly to send them my way. So
that's awesome. Crypto Mom.
Send a message to Hester Peirce. Thank her for her support. And also, if you have innovative solutions for how we can have some sort of framework that makes more sense, she is the person to float them to.
Yes. Well, that is our news for the week. We thank you for being with us. And stick around for the sign-off here, because we're going to show you a fun little example of what AI can do if you really let it. So enjoy. See you next week.
Bye, guys.
Hello, I'm not Johnny Cash. So it's going to be forever, or it's gonna go down in flames. You can tell me when it's over, if the high was worth the pain. Got a long list of ex-lovers, they'll tell you I'm insane. 'Cause I love the players, and you love the game. 'Cause we're young and we're reckless, we'll take this way too far. It'll leave you breathless. or with a nasty scar. Got a long list of ex-lovers, they'll tell you I'm insane, but I've got a blank space, baby, and I'll write your name.